Global mass migration is a huge problem, and we've been using rules from much calmer times, which don't work anymore. We are a multi-ethnic, multiracial society. That doesn't mean we need to be multicultural. They're not the same thing. One of the problems that we have is that liberal societies believe in tolerance, but people are taking that to an extreme where you start to tolerate the thing that will actually destroy the liberalism. The biggest thing that can be done is us actually reducing the demand for government. Let's look at welfare. One of the biggest things that the government spends money on is paying people to stay at home and not work. Reducing the demand for government often means making sure that people don't end up in that place at all. But the real thing that will stop Labour from completely destroying this economy and this country is...
This is The Business of Politics with me, Harry Stebbings. This is the bi-weekly show where we sit down with the world's biggest political figures to discuss solutions to humanity's greatest problems. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you followed Business of Politics on your favourite podcast platform. It helps us massively in sharing these conversations with more people. And I'd love to have you along for the ride. New episodes drop every 2 weeks, so hit follow and stay tuned. Kemi, thank you so much for doing this with us. I'm so looking forward to this, and it's great to have you in the studio.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here, Harry.
Now, I would love to start. It feels a little bit like national pride is decreasing. I heard you say on the Jordan Peterson episode that no longer are we positive and excited in Britain, especially for younger people. And so I'd love to start with, what can be done to really regain this sense of patriotism?
So there are several things that need to be done. But let's look at what's causing the problem. Why is it that a lot of young people feel that everything's terrible? It's because they're continually told that everything is terrible. The planet is burning. You're not going to have a future. University fees are so expensive. You come out with all of this debt. You can't get a job. If you can, it doesn't pay a great wage. And even if you do have a great job with a great wage, it's not enough to buy a house. You can't get a mortgage. So there are lots of factors which mean rightly people feel a bit doom and gloom, but then they're constantly told that everything is terrible, that the country is racist, that people are awful, and so on and so forth. They don't feel any pride. We need to start talking Britain up. We need to start reminding ourselves of who we are, the amazing things this country has done, and also create a shared sense of identity. And one of the things that really worries me is that everybody is breaking off into lots of different identity groups. Mm. And I often tell people that I grew up in a country where everybody looked the same, but there were 300 different languages, lots of different, cultural groups, different religions, and it was almost always conflict one way or another. You need to find an identity that binds people together. My view is that identity is being British. We can all be different types of British, but understanding why people came to this country, what makes it great, keeping what made it great, and not bringing in loads of junk from other places that are actually going to degrade our social fabric. That requires a lot of effort. And I think what's gone wrong is that we've had a class or an era of politicians who've grown up where everything was good and just thought everything's always going to be good and we don't need to do anything. You have to work at a relationship, a marriage, even your relationship with your children, your friends, you've got to work at it. We have to work at building social cohesion. And sometimes we do it in a very sort of superficial way and, we'll just celebrate a celebration, but it's got to be something more meaningful than that.
What do you think we can do to kind of reinvent this sense of being British? Because it's changed over time what it means to be British and who feels that they are British. What can we do to recreate, hey, we may be different in many different ways, but we're both British?
Yes. This is really fascinating because you're right. What is British has changed over a period of time. And if you were to speak to my parents, they grew up under the British Empire. They lived in Nigeria and they were told, you are British. And then there's independence, but that doesn't just disappear. For 100 years or however long, loads of people around the world were told, you're British, you're part of the British Empire, you were subjects of Queen Victoria or, whichever one of her descendants. And these things do evolve over time. And I'm sort of, I'm 45, born in 1980, and I've sort of born as all of that feeling in that particular, I was born in the UK, but going back there, that feeling of being British was sort of disappearing. But I've felt it. And now we have people defining Englishness. What is being English? What isn't being English? And I think the problem is when other people try and tell someone else who they are or what they're about. That's when it's wrong. Ethnic and cultural identity is very personal. It's very fluid. It's on a spectrum. My children, for instance, they are mixed race. They have, a little bit of two very, very different ethnic backgrounds. And we need to be able to adapt to that. And what is it that binds us together? It's the history. It's the history of why people came to this country and how. We don't have, like the US, people who were dragged over here from another continent by force and their descendants. America has a totally different history. But what I find is that American culture is so dominant that many people are taking memes and vibes from there and just simply importing them to the UK. And we had this in 2020 when George Floyd died. And people were acting as if it had happened on British soil. And there was all of this stuff that came out around the Black Lives Matter movement. And I thought, hang on, this isn't us, this isn't right. But so many people were scared to say so. And I remember speaking out about this and getting vilified for it. We need bravery. We need a lot of courage if we're going to sort that sort of thing out.
I'm just interested, there is this discussion of have we lost free speech? And to your point there of people were afraid to speak out and it's quite dangerous when people tell you who you are. How do you think about that question of have we lost free speech? And in some cases, it can be dangerous, people kind of vindicating people for who they are or whatever. Yeah. How do we think about the pros and cons?
So I wrote a pamphlet on free speech about 2018. So 7 years ago. I called it Free-ish Speech. And one of the things I was trying to say is that there have always been limits to free speech, which is why we have defamation laws and libel laws and, you can't shout fire in a theatre. So there've always been limits. But broadly, free speech for me means that you can say what you want and the government doesn't go after you because you're criticizing them. You can say your feelings, you can criticize a religion. That's the thing that we need to protect. You can say what you think, not try and harm other people, but you can say what you think. What I think is happening, first of all, is a self-censorship. So lots of people feeling that, well, I'm not allowed to say this. I don't want people to think this of me. So we've started using shame to cause people to self-censor. And this, again, was something that started not quite 10 years ago. But if you look at the evolution of Twitter and the pylons, we don't see pylons the way we saw them 2017, 2018, and so on. It's actually calmed down quite a lot. And I do think some of this is because of the changes that Elon Musk made to X, as we call it now. I think he made it a bit more balanced. But the people who wanted to censor more, many of them have left the platform. But using shame as a way to force people to self-censor has been happening. And then we have this new thing, which I think is being caused by a new generation of police officers who have grown up under the self-censorship sort of paradigm where you're not supposed to say this, you're not supposed to say that. And they started policing in a way that the last generation of police officers probably wouldn't have done, even though the law has not really changed. We have this thing called non-hate crime incidents, started in 1999. Why has it changed? And I tell people that a lot of the things that are happening aren't necessarily because the text or the law has changed. The ECHR is a classic example. It's because the people making the decisions are different. They have a different culture. They have different ethics. And we need to make sure that we reinforce what was good about those values that we had on free speech and not have people getting attacked because they said something on Twitter that someone didn't like or getting arrested for that. That, I think, is a real problem, and it's an emerging problem.
Does encouraging a unified sense of being British mean discouraging segregation?
100%. So I am someone who thinks that integration actually is not enough, that the aim should be assimilation. But people, if people don't fully assimilate, they will at least integrate. And what we see now is this carving out of so many identities and telling people you can be whatever identity that you want to be culturally, to such an extent that you have people coming to our country and just recreating the same problems which they were running away from. We have to ensure that that doesn't happen. And if you encourage segregation, you will end up with an apartheid type system. That absolutely would be a catastrophe, because then the sort of conflicts that come from that are, nearly always unsolvable. And the more groups you have, the harder it is to solve. So we've got to make sure that we bind people into something shared. And we are, whether people like it or not, we are a multi-ethnic, multiracial society. That doesn't mean we need to be multicultural. They're not the same thing. And people can have personal things that they enjoy doing, personal foods or clothes that they want to wear. That's not what real multiculturalism is. Real multiculturalism is about different languages, different norms, different traditions, customs, behaviors, expectations of how you behave, how you speak to others, how you speak to women, how you talk to a police officer, what you think about authority, and so on and so forth. And that sort of space should not be up for grabs for anybody who wants to. I don't believe in that sort of moral relativism.
There was a minister, I think it was the minister for Saudi tourism or sport or culture, whatever one, I should know. And he said for the World Cup that actually this would be a no drink zone. And actually we're thrilled to welcome tourists and everyone, but this is a no drink zone. And he was kind of unapologetic in it. And I looked at him and I was like, kind of great. That's fantastic. He's like, welcome, but this is our culture. Please accept it. Do you think that's the right approach?
Yes. I think that we should vigorously police our values. And I think that one of the problems that we have is that liberal societies believe in tolerance, but people are taking that to an extreme where you start to tolerate the thing that will actually destroy the liberalism. And I gave a speech about this in December, and it was called "Liberalism Has Been Hacked." That people have figured out where the fault lines are. That if you say people can say whatever they like, then, because it's free speech, then they use that speech to, attack Jews, for example. Say, it's just free speech, it's Zionism I don't like, but actually we can see exactly what's going on. And I am very, very keen that we have what I call a muscular sort of liberalism. This is liberalism. The old school 19th century liberalism is what conservatism now has to protect. We have to protect. That's what conservatism is about. It's about protecting what is good about our society. And we have to stop the exploitation of our good nature, our good values by people who want to bring in something much more malign.
What can one actually do without it be seen as an encroachment on individual liberty or policing?
So I gave a speech at the art conference and I used an example from a lady called Catherine Burbelsing, who runs the Michaela School. It's the best school in the country based on how well their results are given. They take in a relatively, in fact, actually significantly deprived intake. And she's known as the strictest headmistress in the country. And she got taken to court by a family of a girl who wanted to pray at school. And she said, this is a secular school. We don't do that. And they try to use the Equality Act or something else as, not having freedom of religion. But the freedom to practice your religion personally is different from the freedom to impose that on every single institution. And most other teachers would just have given up. She was called Islamophobic. The BBC ran headlines about how her school was toxic. And she just stayed very firm, held true to her values, went to court, defended her school, and when it got to court, she won. Now, if she hadn't won, that would have been on us as legislators to make sure that the law is changed to make it even clearer than it already is, that you can't just have whatever you want so that people can satisfy your personal religious beliefs. Freedom of religion is freedom for you to have your religion. It's not that everybody else needs to kowtow to it, whatever that religion is.
I want to pick up on something that you also said. You said that people feel the jobs that they have don't earn money and that there's this negativity and then they have all this debt. And it seems like there's this real doom loop around the economy and the economy is not in great shape. If I put it bluntly to you, what's the biggest policy lever that you'd do to kickstart economic growth in the country and return to positivity in the economy?
Yes. So I think the doom loop you're talking about is higher taxes, higher spending, more borrowing. And if you make cuts, then services degrade and it causes problems later on. There are lots of policy levers that you can use, but I think the biggest thing that can be done is us actually reducing the demand for government. Supply and demand is a curve that everybody recognizes. But what tends to happen is that people cut the supply of government. So we're going to reduce the numbers of, or the amount of money we're giving to councils to cut spending, or we're going to reduce the number of, workers in a particular sector, reduce the number of civil servants. But if you don't reduce the demand for government, then you're just in that doom loop. You've got to reduce the demand as well as the supply.
Can I just ask, what does reducing the demand mean? Is that privatization?
So let's look at welfare. One of the biggest things that the government spends money on is paying people to stay at home and not work. And you need to make sure that people go out to work. Now, you could cut the supply, you could cut benefits and say, we're just not going to give you this money. But if those people have either an illness or a disability, or they're just so anxious, as one person I'm just too anxious to go to work, we've got to fix that. Reducing the demand for government often means making sure that people don't end up in that place at all. It's the same with people talking about prison places. Oh, there are not enough prison places, or we don't have enough money to spend on prisons, or either or. We need to actually stop people getting into prison in the first place, and that means looking at what's going on with families. And a lot of people don't want to talk about family because they think, it's personal, it's not the government's business. But, family is one of my core conservative principles. The family is the bedrock of every single stable society. And if families are messed up early and kids get messed up early, they will end up on that conveyor belt to prison. And then you have a much bigger, much more expensive problem to solve. So cutting the demand for government, the expectations of welfare, as well as the supply of the welfare money, are important. There are families where people haven't worked for multiple generations. That's a huge demand. Raising pension ages was one of the things that we did in government, and I think even over successive decades, that was reducing the demand for pensions by ensuring that people, as they were living longer, were working longer. So that's what I mean. You've got to do those things too.
How do we actually do this? When we think about the family unit being so crucial, it stops prison, stops addiction, how do we actually do that without, again, kind of encroaching on individual liberty and people feeling more personally attacked?
Yes, it's very, very difficult. But the last thing you said is the key thing. There was a time in the 90s when there was a stigma around single mums. And no one was talking about the dads. And they kept talking about, single mothers. And a lot of the single mothers felt attacked, especially as many of them did not deliberately put themselves in that position. It was the men who ran away or did not live up to their responsibilities. Sometimes the marriages broke down and so on. And it's about not being judgmental and talking about a problem in such a way that it is not really, certainly from a government perspective, criticizing an individual, but about showing what happens if you end up in a particular situation. Many people don't think about the significant increase in poverty probability if you end up as a single parent, whether you're male or female. It's just harder with one person. Two people just makes life a lot easier. And many people just assume that the welfare state can come in and it'll be fine. We need to do things that allow people to understand the risk profile of the decisions that they're making. But we also need to do things that allow families to stay closer together. That, for example, in my view, means investing in places that aren't always London. So many people leave other parts of the country and all go to the place where they can make money. And then they don't have a family support network that can help with childcare and so on. So let's make sure that the wealth of our country is distributed a little bit better. And that doesn't mean just taking piles of tax money and throwing it at communities. That doesn't work. It's not real. It doesn't solve the root cause problem. We need to look at the structural issues that mean that certain geographic areas have fallen behind. And sometimes that might mean pockets of poverty within wealthy areas like London too.
We said about the doom loop being kind of the high taxes and the challenges that come. How do we create an environment where the best entrepreneurs and millionaires want to stay and build their businesses? Is it simply a case of lower taxes?
Well, stop voting Labour. So let's start with that. Stop voting Labour and you solve 60, 70% of the problem. But more seriously, we need to create an environment where entrepreneurialism thrives. It is not government that creates growth. It is business that creates growth. quite a lot of the time, government actually needs to get out of the way. But we have a mindset that has come in and is really, really enforced with Labour, that business is just this thing that's in the way, and if only they would just stop being so much hassle, then the government could just cut things a little bit more fairly. There seems to be just a baseline belief along large sections of the population who do vote left that money is just something that's there, and people who are wealthy have just taken more than their fair share. A lot of people don't understand where money comes from, how productivity generates wealth, and if we don't fix that, then we will keep ending up voting in governments that are really about expropriation. And we need governments that get what creates productivity, what creates a society that fosters, real entrepreneurialism. We need to increase our appetite for risk, because with that risk, you get the rewards of innovation and wealth. You will also get failure, but that's not a problem. We need to become a society where that sort of failure of people taking good risks is rewarded, not one where failure is just punished. And I think the US is actually quite good at that.
Unbelievably good.
The stigma for having run a business that failed is a lot less there, as opposed to here, where you're more likely to hear people say, well, you shouldn't have done that in the first place. And we need to change our culture, not just our, social culture, but also our business culture, in terms of thanking the people who go out and start a business, because they're putting their lives, their homes on the line. They're hiring people. They take a lot of risk, and they should get the rewards for that.
I was sitting at a breakfast the other day with 10 billionaire founders in London, and the question was, if you were asked, what has the government done to make building your business in the UK easier, what would you say? And there was this awful silence, which as an interviewer you dread. And I was just sitting there watching going, oh.
And this is what I want us to fix. I want entrepreneurs to know that the Conservative Party is under new leadership, and we are going to fix this. We want you. We love you. We think that you are the people who have helped create good lives for so many people and an improved quality of life. And that should be respected and recognized.
What does that actually mean in terms of if you look at national insurance, obviously we've seen changes there, but what can be done to make that answer for entrepreneurs be this and this? Is it the national insurance? Is it, subsidizing engineering talent? Is it tax rates?
There is so much that can be done. But I think a lot of it is attitude, and having people who have actually run a business, started a business, been entrepreneurs, worked in the private sector. It's not that easy to start a business. I never started a business, but I did work in businesses that other people started. I have had to hire people, and I know the costs. You have your own P&L. You know how it's going to impact the business. You know that you need to bring in money, otherwise something won't work. And you need people who've been through that sort of experience. We have that on the Conservative benches. You're just looking at people who have done it before and who get it. And I think what ended up happening to us previously was that we'd been in government a very long time, and we just got into this status quo inertia. Inertia is one of the worst things. It's just, this is what we've been doing. It's going to be too hard. And so none of that, all of that needs to stop. We've got to turn this country around. And, I would say to entrepreneurs, you need to know that we love you, and we are going to do everything we can to get you back to this country.
Do you agree that career politicians are potentially dangerous?
Yes and no. It depends on why they are in politics and what they and what they're doing with it. So there are some people I know who've only ever worked in politics, but they understand the system. You have a piece of legislation. Having great ideas is not enough. You need to know how to implement. And actually, a lot of people who are called career politicians will know what's going to happen to a bill when it gets there, when it gets to Parliament, who's going to try and ruin it. There is a skill that many people don't recognize, real political skill. And people who have only ever been in politics often have that. Not everybody. There's some people who don't have that skill and they're still career politicians. But what you really want is a parliament where there is cognitive diversity. Lots of people who think differently. They have shared values within their party, but they can debate without falling out with each other. They're not so overly rigid that they can't see the wood for the trees. You want people who've had lots of different life experiences, shared values, and then they get to a place where they can actually help make the best decisions. Instead, what we have a lot of the time is groupthink. people who don't have any experience at all. I mean, you look at the Labour front bench, you look at the Labour cabinet, most of them haven't even worked in the private sector. It's not about whether they run a business or not. They've come from, trade union backgrounds like Angela Rayner, or they've worked for charities, which is a great thing, but it's a totally different thing to having to, eat what you earn. And so they are very risk averse and also have an attitude towards the people who've done something different. That perhaps these aren't our kind of people. These are bad people. And you look at what they have done with the budget. You look at the national insurance increase, the raising of the threshold. Those are decisions made by people who've never had to make those decisions before. And more of that is coming. This is just the beginning. And what I worry about is what the country is going to be like in 4 years' time after 4 years of Labour. And the Conservative Party needs to be ready to fix not just the problems we have now, but the problems of 4 years' time. The job of opposition is critical. So the country very angry with Conservatives. They kicked us out, but they've given us the job of opposition. And part of rebuilding trust with the public is doing that job properly. So that means making sure that I shift the Overton window as much as possible for where Labour is. So stopping them from doing stupid things by making the argument. You make the argument at PMQs, a lot of backbenchers get a bit uncomfortable, they shift the argument. We had this thing with the rape gangs, for instance, where Labour weren't listening. I called for a national inquiry. They never do exactly what I've said, but they have started reviewing it. I think they need to go further, but that's what my job is. I can send loads of tweets and do loads of, TikTok videos and so on, but the real thing that will stop Labour from completely destroying this economy and this country is me in Parliament doing a lot of stuff that's not very exciting for shows and so on, but actually is making sure that the regulation is done properly, making sure that we vote and make an argument, convince people and push things, move that over to the window into the sensible area. And if we can do that, then we will limit, not completely stop, but we should be able to limit some of the damage that they're doing.
What do you say to the people that say you're the ones that broke it?
I would say to them that it's broken across Western society. France has the same problems that we do. Germany has the same problems. Italy has the same problems. The US, to a certain extent, has lots of those problems. You look at, global mass migration is a huge problem. Everybody's experiencing it. And we've been using rules from much calmer times, which don't work anymore. Low growth, high inflation, again, a global problem. Intense competition from an aggressive China that is an economic threat to almost every other country in the world. You sit at the World Trade Organization as trade secretary. I'd sit there and I saw ministers, I won't say which countries, crying because of what China was doing to them in the arguments and in the in the rooms where we were negotiating. So what has happened is that we've been doing things in the same old way, but the world is changing. And this was what I was trying to say when I gave a speech talking about the West should stop being weak. Don't let our wonderful liberal values that everybody wants be hacked and turned into something else. And that means us getting serious. And the system won't work anymore using the same old rules. But we need to change how we do things. And that's what I want to do.
In terms of us getting serious, we have, obviously, America going through a period of incredible strength. China, whatever happens, still very strong. To what extent do we need a united European bloc? Because otherwise, with this fragmented, irrelevant group of countries between two superpowers, and are we kind of falling into irrelevance?
If we don't get our act together, we could. We need to get serious. The Munich Security Conference. The Munich Security Conference for me was really interesting because you've got J.D. Vance saying, pull your socks up, everybody. This isn't good enough. And the conference closed with, I think it was the chair of the conference, crying. And I had just given a speech saying that we need to stop being weak, that it's not our values that are wrong, it's the weakness, it's not enforcing what we believe in, it's tolerating too much nonsense. And I just thought, what will other countries around the world think that here is a serious security conference and the chair of it crying for reasons that look like, well, we didn't like what someone said. I mean, that's just silly. That is the kind of thing that is going to destroy us. Fiddling around with lots of silly things like, your pronouns on your email and, a lot of the diversity and inclusion initiatives, which are not scientific, not evidence-based, actually make things worse, just so we can virtue signal. All of this is a distraction. We need to focus on the basics. Government should do a few things that only government can do well, not try and do everything badly. We need to, look at what we're doing to our industries. Are we deindustrializing while, on the altar of net zero? Is that working? Is it not working? How do we fix that? How do we improve that? And I just don't see those conversations happening in Europe. And you look at China, you look at Israel, you look at a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, they are just serious about where they want to get to, whereas we're just trying to share the pie that we've got now. And if I was to say what my biggest belief in politics is right now, it is that we are living off the inheritance of Thatcher, Reagan, Gorbachev. What are we leaving for the next generation? What's the inheritance we're leaving for our children and their children? We need to start building that now rather than seeing how we can eke out a little bit more of what's left and share it amongst ourselves.
You said we should do the things that we're good at and not everything that maybe we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
What are we doing that we shouldn't be doing?
Government spends a lot of time trying to please everybody. And you look at the debates in Parliament, and quite a lot of it is someone wasn't happy about this. And so we should do something. There was this ridiculous thing we had last year where the Labour government was talking about sorting out Oasis tickets because they didn't like the fact that lots of people couldn't get their tickets for the Oasis concert. This is the tip of the iceberg. There is so much stuff that's going on that government is sticking its nose in that it has no business doing. And I saw it on the inside saying, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And I wanted to focus on, nuts and bolts trade policy. And I remember, for example... I don't mean to interrupt you, but it was a great example of not understanding business because they put in place regulation around pricing on tickets, which completely killed a huge amount of the ticket providers. Yeah. And listen, it's economics, demand and supply. This is how pricing works. Exactly. But it just showed the complete lack of awareness. But this is what I mean. Now, a Conservative government would not have looked at something like that as an issue for government to solve. But even we spent a lot of time just trying to please. And I think part of this is that we have a lot of people who've come into politics because they want to be nice. They want to do nice things. But actually, sometimes politics is about making hard decisions. Government is about making hard decisions. If the decisions were easy, then you wouldn't need government. You just have a bunch of people just ticking boxes, and handing money out. So we need to just get people who are looking at the trade-offs, often economic trade-offs, and making tough decisions that are going to be better for the majority or for all of us overall, and that lasts from decade to decade. That's the real crux of what government should be doing.
The challenge is you have to get voted in.
Yes.
And the tough decisions and sometimes saying the uncomfortable things aren't what people want to hear.
Exactly. This has been the eternal challenge. And the way to deal with that is to do what I'm trying to do now, which is talk about principles and values. Show people what kind of person you are. You talk about your personal experience. They understand where you grew up, why you think the things that you do, what sort of family you have or had, what sort of decisions you made, where you worked, whether you started a business or you worked as a nurse or whatever. And then people decide to put their trust in an individual. I think that we need to be honest. We need to not just tell people what they want to hear, but tell them the truth. If you tell people what they want to hear, you're not trying to help them, you're trying to help yourself. I believe in telling people the truth so that we can all fix the problems. It is not easy. Too many people take the easy route. I am trying to do this the hard way, because if you do things the hard way, then you have an easier time later. So I like to deal with a smaller problem now rather than try and get over it and ignore it and having to deal with the bigger problem later. And I had this during the leadership contest where lots of people said, you've got to offer this job to this person so that they can come out and back you. And I refused to offer jobs because I needed the flexibility to put together a shadow cabinet that I knew would be competent and would bring the party together. And I'm glad I took that decision not to offer any roles, because it meant that I had flexibility later. Did it cost me some votes? Probably, but it was the right thing to do. The same thing with not rushing out to policy announcements. People said, you need to announce that you're leaving the ECHR. You've got to do that, and then you'll get these votes. And I thought, well, I think we probably do need to leave the ECHR, but I haven't got a plan for it. So I'm not going to say we're going to leave before we have a plan. This is what we did on Brexit, where, I wasn't even an MP at the time. You had a vote to leave the European Union, but no plan on how to do so. Having policy without plans is not real. It's just announcements. And we see this with Labour as well. They make a lot of announcements. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. No plan at all. I mean, you are a VC. You've seen how this stuff works. You can't just go in and say, we're going to make loads of money and everything's going to be great. You've got to have a plan. And sometimes having a plan means that you can see what's likely to go wrong, and you have to be honest about what your probability, risk appetite, the probabilities of success are likely to be, what could go wrong. Those are the things that investors actually want to know. And if we can do that as a Conservative Party, I think that we will win. This is a distressed business that I've taken over. And people, you go into a distressed business, you've got the wrong staff, you have a product which is actually good but has not adapted for the market. You've got loads of really good intellectual property, and you have competitors who've come in, but the fundamentals aren't there. And I think that this is actually a really exciting opportunity to take a distressed business that has really good fundamentals and turn it around. And that's really, one of the messages that I want people to hear, that now is the time to get in and help make this country great again. And the Conservative Party is the vehicle to do that.
Do you think you would manage the relationship with Trump more effectively than Keir Starmer would?
Well, we don't know yet what that relationship is looking like. I mean, he had a good meeting with President Trump last night, so I thought that was very positive. Some of the things that I'd wanted, him coming here to visit, the trade deal in particular, are happening. I don't think a lot of the foolish tweets and all of that nonsense were helpful. So I actually thought that President Trump was being quite magnanimous because it's not easy when people have been very, very vocally rude about you. I mean, they said some awful things. The foreign secretary
David
said,
Lammy about...
Yeah, he said that everything that comes out of Trump's mouth is poo. I mean, that's just an extraordinary thing for an MP to say, let alone someone who is now the Foreign Secretary. And this is what I mean when I say that Labour are student politicians. They just say things without thinking about them. They don't have proper plans. And
is it possible to guarantee a minister's position in perpetuity?
Not really, no. Everybody serves at the pleasure of the leader, and the leader serves at the pleasure of the MPs. So there's a bit of a circle that goes on there.
Fascinating. Can I ask, in terms of defence and foreign aid, we need to increase defence budgets. Everyone acknowledges that.
Yeah.
Is that a reasonable ask? Because it's, again, to your point, it's one thing to say something, it's another thing to do it. Is that a realistic expectation that we're able to increase defence budgets to the extent that we need to?
So let's look at what we were spending during the Cold War when we weren't actually fighting. We were spending about 4%, maybe 5%. Now we're spending 2.3 now. It was 2, I think, when about 10 years ago or so. So we should be spending more because the world is becoming more dangerous. There are new threats emerging. And what we need to do is rewire our economy so that it can support more defense spending and less welfare, less of what government is spending money on that it shouldn't be doing. And that needs a plan. At the moment, what we have is a government that is trying to preserve the status quo, that this is how things are. So let's just try and keep them the way they are. We need to get business flowing in this country again. We need to increase productivity. That's what will create the economic growth, and then we will have money for defense. Defense and security and a strong economy go hand in hand. If you're not secure, you won't be able to grow your economy. And if you don't grow your economy, you won't have enough money for defense and security. So they've got to be done at the same time. It's not just spending money. Get the money first too.
We see the transition of budgets from foreign aid to defence. Foreign aid is always one that causes a lot of animosity. People are very pro it, people are very against it. How do you feel the right approach is to foreign policy moving forwards? Foreign aid moving forwards.
So I think that what people don't like about foreign aid is feeling that they're giving money to corrupt governments, or they are wasting it on silly sort of initiatives, teaching girls to dance or that sort of thing. That frustrates a lot of people. People expect aid to be something that you give to a country that's experiencing famine, or, there's a war looking after refugees. That was really what aid was supposed to be. And then it turned into development, helping countries sort of build so that they could have economic growth. And then it just moved into this sort of liberal left, let's try and make them be like us. And here are the things we care about. And you had charities going in that were not actually doing what I would call charity work. That's what annoys people. And so it's made a lot of people very hostile. And then when people see other countries getting their money as taxpayers and their roads aren't being fixed or they can't get a doctor's appointment, they become resentful. So you have to sort out what's happening in our country too. And the foreign aid budget is not going to cover defense anyway. But the signal that it sends that we're moving things from this bucket to that bucket, I think is important. I'm not sure hypothecated taxes are always a great idea. And I don't think aid should be a hypothecated tax as it is. That if we need to reprioritize, we should do.
We mentioned also that a lot of places are suffering from the same problems. One problem that is common amongst all European cities is also crime. How do we think about creating safety, policing, and ensuring that we go back to the Bobby on the beat on the corner of the road that I think we probably both remember?
Okay, so we need more police on the streets. Law and order is a core Conservative principle. Without it, there's no point voting Conservative. We need to make sure that we have strong law and order on our streets, that people know that they can be safe when they walk out, and that if something goes wrong, that this is where the state can come in to fix things. And I think that there are several issues. One is that the police are overstretched. This is why having more police on the beat is key. But they're overstretched because there are a lot of new things that have come in that now are classified as crime that just didn't exist before. And it's not just stuff like online fraud. It's, I remember being at the Justice Select Committee and the policemen were talking about how now, previously when they needed to look for evidence, they go around someone's house and, look at papers and so on. Now they have to look at everything in your phone, what you said on your Facebook, what maybe even on your TV messages in all sorts of different apps. They're looking at what your Fitbit has done, where were you, GPS, and that's taking up quite a lot of time. I'm hoping that AI will be able to help resolve this. But there's also a belief, which I don't think is completely correct, that the police are ignoring certain types of crime. I think that there is now a belief that if it's low level, things shouldn't be tackled. This doesn't just happen on the police side. It also happens, even security people in supermarkets say they're told that they shouldn't go after somebody who's stolen because it's not worth the hassle if they get hurt. Yeah. And I think we need to fix that. This is the broken windows theory. You've got to look at the small crimes as well, mobile phone theft, and fix those, and then it stops them escalating to big crimes as well.
I do want to talk about education. It's such a crucial part. You've spoken before about making education more skills-based. Mm-hmm. You have complete control. Don't worry about what anyone else says. Don't even worry about what the party says. What would you most change in terms of UK school curriculum?
So the curriculum up until now has been something that academies have been able to opt out of. I've always wanted the curriculum to make sure that it focused on the basics so that the poorest children had the best start in life. I don't think the curriculum should be designed around middle-class families only, because they will be fine almost. The children from those families are often fine no matter what. I think that the worst thing that's coming into the curriculum is a lot of stuff which is actually harmful to our sense of belonging about our country. A lot of the stuff, like really contested ideas on extreme gender ideology, contested ideas on race and nationality, all of that stuff needs to be removed. We had a modern history curriculum that actually was about making everybody feel like they had a sense of belonging in the country, and I think that's absolutely key. But I also think that the curriculum needs to be something which is looking at the future, which is quite a hard thing to do. I have a bias because I'm an engineer, so I did STEM. And I think that that's really helped me and made a difference. So making sure that people have got that maths, got that understanding in an age where, if AI is taking over everything, people need to be more literate, more, if not functional literacy, functional numeracy, making sure that that's absolutely key. But we've got to make sure that people have hands-on skills too. So and this is not so much about the school curriculum. I have 2 degrees. I have an engineering degree. I did a 4-year MEng. And then I went to night school while I was working and did an LLB in law. But a lot of people don't know that I also had an apprenticeship before. I had an engineering apprenticeship. And I remember more from my apprenticeship than I do from either of the two degrees. I was using my hands, I was building computers, I was fixing stuff. I can still do all of that stuff even now in a way that I can't do parallel integration anymore or any of the digital systems analysis that I studied for and did well in my exams. Because that stuff, it's very academic, it leaves you, but the stuff that you do with your hands stays. And I think that we've been very bad at some of those vocational elements of schooling, and we need to look at that again because we're not equipping people for the world that's coming.
What does it mean to look at that again? Does that mean like funding apprenticeships? Does that mean funding academies?
Yeah, it's well, looking at what the apprenticeships people are doing and do they make sense, but also not just relying on schools to do the fixing. So I think business needs to do a lot more. People, when I speak to businesses, they say people don't have the skills. Like, you just got to go out there, get them, and train them up. That's what used to happen. That's what an apprentice was. It was somebody who had no skills, and you brought them in, and then they learned to be, a baker or whatever. And I think the expectation that everyone will come out of school or university fully formed has increased when actually it should not. And we need to also make sure that people get second chances. Sometimes people weren't ready when they did their exams, and it didn't work out. And I had a second chance when I did my which was one I actually didn't need. I thought maybe I've done the wrong degree. Maybe I shouldn't have done engineering. I'm quite interested in the law. I probably should have been a lawyer. And I had a second chance in a way that many people don't have that second chance. And as it turned out, I was actually more of an engineer than I was a lawyer. Now a legislator, I'm making law, but I use a lot of the logical principles from the engineering and apply it, which is why it spooks my colleagues out so much. I think that we need more logic, less passion, more reason in the world.
People say when they compare the UK to, say, America or China, young people just don't want to work as hard here.
I think that there is something in that, but that's because of the expectations that have been created that actually you don't need to work that hard. I had that when I was doing my A-levels. I had teachers saying, it's fine if you get an E, you still passed. You can't set low levels of expectation. It's that soft bigotry of low expectations that destroys so many lives. Everybody should try and be the very best that they can be. And I think this is some of the complacency that's we see in the West, that we've been wealthy for so long. We just think, oh, well, it's always going to be like this. It is not always going to be like this. I grew up, one of the reasons why I'm really obsessed about this is because I grew up in a relatively wealthy family that lost its money. So I know that things change.
That's a tough thing.
Yeah, things change. So I see many people in the UK thinking, yeah, the UK is great. We're a rich country. We should do this. Let's give lots of money to these people. Let's invite loads of people from the world to stay here. And I keep thinking, you can't assume that what we have now is what we're going to have tomorrow. We've got to build, we've got to work hard to make sure that we're giving something to that next generation.
On universities, I have to admit I'm biased. I'm a dropout. I was only there for about 4 weeks. You've got higher costs, lower quality. People are going, why should we do this? My question to you is, how do we think about the future of universities? And today, given cost and quality, does it make sense?
So this is one of the things that the policy commissions, which I'm starting, is going to look at. We've got to look at all of these things across the board. The thing that bothers me most about the university system now is the amount of debt that young people are having to carry. I was the first generation that had to pay tuition fees. And I remember having about £14,000 in 2003 after a 4-year degree. And I didn't pay it off until 2011. And now people are leaving with £50,000, £60,000 debt, and they're just never paying it off. I remember the day that I made my last payment to the student loans company, and it felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and it was amazing. And to never have that feeling, to just carry that burden forever, it's got to be looked at. It does not feel right. But what I can't say is, like, we're just not going to do this. I need to have a plan for how we can fix this. And it's the same thing with anything from how do we ensure we don't deindustrialize to the question on law and order. The world is changing and the old ways aren't working. And so you're ending up having your mobile phone stolen, even though we're spending lots of money on law and order, crime and policing. What needs to change? And what I'm really looking for is lots of people with bright ideas who can help our policy commissions, send us what's going wrong, how they think it can be fixed, and then we piece it all together. That's what we do have. Unless something goes catastrophically wrong with Labour, we have some time to get this right. So let's come up with a plan and fix it, whether it's tuition fees or mobile phones.
I do just want to finish on a little element really around the Conservative Party and how you want to take leadership moving forwards. What do you think, like we said, hey, we slightly lost our way. When we think about future conservatism and carving out that identity, what does the identity of your Conservative Party most embody in the future?
Okay. So the easiest way to look at it is to think of what is the purpose of conservatism? What are we for? If you forget what you're for, then you start doing all sorts of weird things. And conservatism preserves the very best of a society. Doesn't mean that absolutely nothing changes. We are suspicious of change because quite a lot of change goes bad. We are not progressivists at all. And what we are going to do is have visibly conservative values, authentic conservative values. This is why we now have a challenge on the right, because we spent a lot of time trying to please everyone. We're going to be very focused. We're going to start with principles. What are the things we believe in? The importance of family, which we talked about earlier. Equality under the law, which I'm not sure we have. Lots of people think that there's two-tier policing. We're all splitting into different groups. People think there's a hierarchy of protected characteristics, and if you fall into one characteristic, you can get away with things that others can't get away with. We've got to scrap all of that, get rid of it. We need to start talking about real citizenship. You know, not just having a passport. That's not what citizenship is. It's about making sure that people are invested in the success of their community and the people around them, not obsessed with what's going on thousands of miles away. And this is what I was alluding to, you know, when you asked me about, culture and identity, that we need to stop being shy about saying who we are, what we're about, where we're from. Let's get a shared British identity and stop splitting people into lots of different groups and trying to over-identify. Those sorts of things people want to hear about. Sound money, not just penny pinching and not just, splurging, calling spending investment. Sound money that gives people confidence.
I tweeted recently that Keir Starmer will be the last Prime Minister that doesn't have a podcast, a newsletter, a blog, a TV channel, whatever. But owning your own direct lines of communication, I think, will be absolutely crucial. Like him or not, Farage is a very media-fied person, and he plays to the media well. Do you ever worry that you say things that people don't want to hear and sometimes say the hard things, and on the flip side, he's kind of just entertaining? Is that a difficult world to play between?
I don't think so. I have always taken what I think was the difficult road, and it's paid off. And what I think that people will remember is that this is not I'm a celebrity or Strictly Come Dancing. You are voting for, at a general election, what you are going to live with. And that's going to have an impact on your children, on your job, your partner's job, your parents. It's going to have an impact. And it isn't about whether you want to have a drink with someone in a pub. And this is what many people forgot at the last general election. They were really angry with us, and they voted whatever they could to kick us out, whether it was Reform or Lib Dem or Labour. And many of those people don't like what they've got because they forgot that you're going to have this new thing. And I know people who voted Labour who've had to change their child's school because they can't pay the VAT. I've met farmers who voted Reform and they got a Labour MP, and now they have to pay this crazy family farms tax. And this is the sort of thing I'm talking about, that you need to know what you're voting for. Vote for someone who shares your values and has experience and credibility, not just someone who shares your frustrations, because that's not enough. And that's what we're offering. And this is what the new leadership of the Conservative Party is looking like.
Do you feel you have the quality of young politicians around you to build a really effective cabinet?
Yes. Firstly, if you look at the situation we're in, we have 120 Conservative MPs. So people need to understand that we're not in the situation where we had 300 anymore. But if we win, we will have more good people, many of them the best people who lost their seats during the 2024 election. But what I have now is an opportunity to reshape the Conservative Party in the way that I think a lot of people who are on the centre-right want to see. Let's get more entrepreneurs. Let's get more people who've run businesses. Let's get those experts, that talent. Let's get them in. Now, the reshaping of the Conservative Party for the future is starting. It's not the Conservative Party of 2005 or 2015. This is going to be the party for 2030, 2040. That's what we're going to be doing.
Can I do a quick fire round? I'm
Yes,
going to say a short statement. You give me your immediate thoughts. This is a really unfair one.
Okay.
You said about the best people could come back. Who was the best person who lost their seat?
No, I will not do that, because every person I mention will sound like I don't think others are the best. And many of the best people are still there too. So everyone around my shadow cabinet has been in government, and that's helped so much because I didn't have to tell them what to do. They just got off and did it. And you look at Rob Jenrick and Priti Patel and Mel Stride, they're all brilliant people who have been doing a fantastic job.
Listen, the flip side was I asked who's the worst that did stay. So I'm not asking that.
Definitely not saying that.
One problem facing Britain that keeps you up at night?
Children on smartphones. And what are they looking at?
Would you ban social media for children under a certain age?
Yes, I didn't have social media, and I can see how addictive it is. And there's a lot of research that's out there. Jonathan Haidt is a huge favorite of mine.
Yeah.
And what he's showing is that it changes brains. And we need to give young kids the best start in life. And it's so hard, like children put a lot of pressure on their parents. Like, I really need a phone. Everyone at school has one. And we need to give parents a hand as well.
Yeah, he always says about encouraging children to climb trees.
Yes, indeed.
I totally with you there.
Yes.
What about the way that your parents brought you up? Have you done deliberately differently with your children?
Nothing. My parents were great. Look at me. I love my parents. I've lost my dad. I miss him very much. My mum is still alive, but I'm very pleased about how they brought me up. And I hope I can do the same for my kids.
What have you changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
I'm not somebody who changes her mind very frequently. I'm not a weather vane. I don't blow around depending on what's going on. So I'm quite steadfast and resilient. So in the last 12 months, I can't say that I've changed very much, but I will when the facts change. I will change my mind. If my risk appetite changes, I will change my mind.
So funny when you were talking, I was thinking John Maynard Keynes. Should MPs be paid more to attract the highest quality people?
It's not just about money. It's about so much more than that. A lot of people don't go into politics because, not necessarily because of the pay, but the opportunity cost. That you go into politics and once you've finished, your skill set, according to most people in the private sector, has not increased. So I know a lot of MPs who've had to go back to their old job after losing their seat, and they haven't increased, their marketability. It's a big thing to ask people to sacrifice life for public service and not get an additional benefit from that. I think people should be allowed to improve their professional skill sets while being an MP. This whole thing of...
So should they have second jobs?
In some cases, yeah. Absolutely. I think that, if you look at what I did, what did I do before I was an MP? I was a systems analyst. I've forgotten, 90% of what I used to do. If I had stopped being an MP, it would be very hard to go back to that and not necessarily that easy to transition into something else. And I don't think that would be a problem for me because I have a professional sort of qualification background. I could get up to speed very quickly. But for other people, that's not necessarily the case, especially the people who start very young. If you come into politics in your 20s and you lose in your 30s, there's a huge chunk of life-building experience that disappears. And people should be able to continue in a skill set and bring that experience from the outside world into politics. That's what I want. That outside experience into politics is key.
Which foreign political figure do you most respect and why?
Georgia Maloney. I think that she is somebody who lots of people really underestimated. They mocked her for all her height, the way she looked and so on. And she's been a very strong, effective centre-right leader of Italy. And I love her. We have a mutual admiration society.
Final one. How do you most want to be remembered in British politics? When you think back and project forward many years, 20, 30 years, how do you most want to be remembered?
Fixing the problems and making sure we only had one term of Labour. Yes.
Listen, thank you so much for joining me today, and this has been such a joy.
Thank you, Harry. I really enjoyed it too.